Hello, and welcome back to the Atlas Agency's continuing investigation of the Path to Carcosa cycle for Arkham Horror the card game. I'm your host, Brandon, and in this video I'll be taking a look at the 11 new player cards in Black Star's Rise, that's Mythos Pack number 5 in the Carcosa cycle. Hope you enjoy! Black Star's Rise has 11 player cards in total. It's 2 cards per faction, plus 1 extra for the Mystics, and there are no neutral cards. One of the themes in this pack is spells, and there are 3 new spell cards, including 2 new non-Mystic spell assets. Plus there's one other card that references the spell trait. In honor of that spell theme, I thought I would start with the Mystic cards. Our first one is St. Hubert's Key. This is a level 0 asset that costs 4 resources. It is an item and a charm. Occupies your accessory slot. You get +1 willpower, +1 intellect, and -2 sanity. There's also reaction trigger. When you would be defeated by horror, discard St. Hubert's Key, immediately heal 2 horror. I was curious about the flavor behind this card, so I looked into it. St. Hubert's Key is a sacramental object, usually a piece of iron in the shape of a nail or a cross, and it was a traditional cure for rabies, as St. Hubert was believed to have miraculously cured a man who was bit by a rabid dog. So if a person thought they'd been bit by a rabid animal, the key would be heated up and then pressed to the area of the bite, which seems to be what's going on in the artwork on the card. Doing that might sterilize or cauterize the bite wound, so there may have been a practical side to it. That second ability on the card probably represents you heating up and applying the key to save yourself from catching rabies. Rabies affects your brain, so there's a weird sort of flavor sense there. It is a neat card. It's one that seems to have generated some excitement just in the discussion about the pack. Boosting 2 different stats through the accessory slot is really nice, especially this particular pair of skills, and the drawback is mostly just the resource cost on this one. I don't see the fact that it gives you -2 sanity as being that bad or even a negative at all, considering that thanks to the second ability, if you do happen to take too much horror, you won't get eliminated, you'll just lose the key. The horror healing, coupled with the 2 sanity that you get back once the key's gone, means that you should be left with 4 remaining sanity if it ever goes away. So I don't really consider that too much of a drawback, and a lot of the characters who can take this are going to have a pretty high sanity anyway. It may even be useful if you're trying to trigger cards like the Desperate skills that key off having a low sanity. On top of seeing this in Mystic deck lists, I've also seen this in Ashcan Pete lists, coupled with Dark Horse to really pile on the stat boosts. I haven't got to play with this myself yet, but I expect I will try to use it in something soon. Our second Mystic card is an upgraded level 2 version of the event Ward of Protection from the core set. The original Ward of Protection canceled the revelation effect of a non-weakness treachery card that you yourself drew at a cost of 1 resource and 1 horror. What changes with this level 2 version is that it no longer has to be a card that you drew yourself. It can be a card drawn by any investigator and at any location. I think I'm on board with this. It is a useful upgrade and probably reasonably priced at 2 experience. I know I've had moments in the past where I've had the original Ward of Protection in my hand when another investigator drew a treachery card that would have been a great target to cancel. I like that it doesn't require you to be at the same location as the other investigator. They can be anywhere on the map. Last cycle we got a level 5 version of Ward of Protection, which still only worked on your own cards. It just expanded it to be able to cancel non-treachery cards, basically enemies, and I think that I actually like this version better than the level 5 one. I think it's just more likely to see play on my table. In addition to the spells in this pack, we also get a spell support card in the form of an upgraded level 3 version of the Arcane Initiate ally. This version gains a combat icon. The resource cost is down from 1 to 0. It's got 1 additional sanity, and most importantly, its force trigger has changed. Previously, it just added 1 doom to the card when it entered play. Now you have the option of either taking that 1 doom or instead putting 2 horror on the card. The original Arcane Initiate is recognized as a pretty good card, and I think for the most part we've come to terms with and accepted that doom token. So is having the option now to avoid that doom worth the 3 experience points? I think maybe late campaign it might be, but I don't see this as a very high priority card. It's probably good for Norman Withers. Norman really likes having the original Arcane Initiate out, since it's nice to be able to shuffle your deck on demand just to get a different card on top for his ability. Our level 0 Seeker card in this pack is Guidance. This is a 0 resource event. Choose another investigator at your location who has yet to take his or her turn this round. That investigator may take an additional action during his or her turn this round. Note that the card isn't fast, so there's not a net gain in actions. You're essentially just moving one of your actions over to another investigator. I think if you want to justify giving a card slot over to this, then you really need to build your deck with an eye towards taking advantage of it, at least a little bit. There are a number of stat boosting cards that have effects that last for a phase or for a player's turn, and extending a player's turn by an action can help them take better advantage of those cards. That's cards like Encyclopedia, Fight or Flight, Keen Eye, and the Red Gloved Man. There are also some difficulty reducing cards too, like Anatomical Diagrams, plus a new card which we'll look at in just a second. Will to Survive is a good one to extend too. If you're running one or more of those cards, or if you have a teammate who is, then maybe Guidance is worth consideration. Our other Seeker card in this pack is one of those non-mystic spell assets. Arcane Insight is level 4, costs 3 resources, and occupies one of your arcane slots. Comes with uses, 3 charges, fast trigger. While an investigator is taking his or her turn, spend 1 charge. Your location gets -2 Shroud until the end of this turn, limit once per turn. This is pretty neat. It's sort of like a supercharged version of Flashlight. You get the same -2 reduction in the Shroud value of your location, but it works for an entire round, and you can apply it for another investigator. It even stacks with Flashlight, so by using both cards, you could get a location to -4 Shroud, which, barring the autofill token, is going to mean a guaranteed success on most locations. There are a few locations here and there with Shrouds of 5 or higher, but not all that many. So I think this card's worthwhile for any of the current Seeker investigators. Recall also, though, that Marie and Akachi have deck building options that allow them to dip out of faction for this, and I think the card's a nice boost for them. Survivors in this pack have a skill theme going on, and their level 0 card is a skill. It's Not Without a Fight, which has 1 willpower icon, 1 combat icon, and 1 agility icon. Commit to a skill test only if you are engaged with an enemy. For each enemy engaged with you, Not Without a Fight gains +1 willpower, +1 combat, and +1 agility. Since you have to be engaged with at least one enemy to use this, it's always going to give at least a +2. Then if you have a second enemy engaged with you, you're up to +3, and so on. I'm not really feeling this one. I think even if you do find yourself in a situation where this gives a +3 or better, it's still just a boost to 1 test. That's helpful, but probably not enough to dig you out of that situation where you're surrounded by multiple enemies. I think there are a lot of other skills that I would rather see in that situation. Probably just a plain old Overpower, or maybe Survival Instinct if you're trying to escape from all those enemies. It's probably okay in Min, but I think you could say that for a lot of skills. If you thought you were playing the Survivor class before, unfortunately, you were mistaken. It's only in Black Star's Rise that you can become a true survivor. Represented here is the ability to find something to eat on this hostile alien world. This one's pretty straightforward. Level 3 event, costs 3 resources, return 3 innate skills from your discard pile to your hand. So far we have 18 skills that have the innate trait out of about 32 skills total, not counting signature cards, so it's a pretty good number. Every survivor skill printed so far has the innate trait, and looking through the list here, a few options that stand out to me as good targets for this are Guts, Inquiring Mind, Inspiring Presence, Quick Thinking, Resourceful, Stroke of Luck, and Unexpected Courage. I think if you're running a reasonable number of those cards, then this is going to be a decent purchase. It's a little frustrating that, like the card Try and Try Again from the last cycle, this is 1 level too high for Min to be able to take it. I think she would have liked to have this. We've seen some skill-heavy Ashcan Pete lists recently, but those are usually oriented around Dark Horse, so with the resource cost on this at 3, I'm not sure if it's a perfect fit. Also, there are no icons on this card, so if you can't afford it, or if you don't have enough targets in your discard pile to make it worthwhile, this could end up as dead weight in your hand. The first of our rogue cards is Narrow Escape. This is a level 0 event that costs 0 resources. It has the Fortune trait, so sorry Rex Murphy. Fast, play when an enemy makes an attack of opportunity against you. Cancel that attack. You get +2 skill value for the next skill test you perform this turn. I've played with this one just a little in a Skids deck. I feel like I'm still kind of feeling it out, but so far I like it. I've always been pretty fond of Dodge. This card is a little narrower than Dodge in the scope of the attacks it can cancel, but I think it's significant that unlike Dodge, this card doesn't cost any resources to play. The skill boost is nice as well. At times it may even be useful just to take an investigation action when you're engaged with an enemy, just to be able to use this to boost your intellect. It's kind of nice to be able to safely get an asset into play too when you're engaged with an enemy. I suspect that playing assets might be the most common way I end up using this. I know there have been games where I've been low on health or sanity, down to like 1 or 2, and I had an ally in hand that could give me a little safety net there, but I couldn't get the ally played because I couldn't afford to take the attack of opportunity to play it. So this would help in those situations. Tentative thumbs up for me on Narrow Escape. Our second rogue card is a level 4 asset called Suggestion. This is actually our first rogue asset to use the arcane slot. It is a spell and it occupies one of your 2 arcane slots. Costs 3 resources, comes with uses, 3 charges. First ability says you can spend an action and exhaust the card to evade. Add your willpower value to your skill value for this evasion attempt. If you do not succeed by at least 2, remove 1 charge from Suggestion. Has a second ability which is a reaction. When a non-elite enemy would attack you, spend 1 charge to cancel that attack. One of the more interesting things about this card is that the charges it comes with aren't required for the main ability. You only have to spend them to use that secondary ability that lets you cancel attacks. So once you run out of suggestion charges, you can't cancel attacks anymore, but you still get to use the card and exhaust it to boost your evade tests. So I wonder if this might be a pattern that we see with future rogue spell assets, that they still retain some functionality even when they're out of charges, just as a way to make them feel distinct from the mystic spell assets that we're used to. At the moment, with just this one example, I guess it's too early to say. We also had in the Seeker class in this pack Arcane Insight, which felt a little bit distinct from the mystic spells too because it was a fast trigger and didn't require an action to use. But then again, we've also seen the upgraded Archaic Glyphs, which are Seeker spells, and those use charges just like regular Mystic spell assets. So time will tell, I guess, but I think it would be cool to see each class have its own distinct flavor for arcane assets and have them not all work exactly like the Mystic ones that we're used to. The last cards we have to look at in this pack are the Guardian cards, and Guardians make out pretty well here. Both of their new cards are strong. At level 0, we have an event called On the Hunt. This costs 1 resource. Fast, play when you would draw an encounter card during the Mythos phase. Instead, search the top 9 cards of the encounter deck for an enemy, spawn it engaged with you instead of its normal spawn location, and shuffle the encounter deck. If you cannot, draw the top card of the encounter deck. Pretty sure that the tracks he's looking at were made by Big Bird. I've really enjoyed playing with this card. I think it's a solid addition to the Guardian toolbox. I'm finding for Guardians it's getting more and more difficult with each expansion to decide which events are going to make the cut. I see a couple of ways that you can approach using this card, the first of which is just to use it as encounter deck control. So if you're better equipped to deal with an enemy than you are with a treachery, or if you're trying to avoid a particularly nasty treachery, then you use On the Hunt to get yourself an enemy. It's not guaranteed, but 9 cards gives you, in most scenarios, I think, a pretty good chance. Zoe is especially well equipped to do this. She can take out low health enemies with minimal effort between Beat Cop and her cross. A 2 or 1 health enemy is probably not going to take her any actions, or at least there's a chance she can do that with no actions if she gets both of those things out. It's also nice for characters with abilities that trigger off defeating enemies too, like Roland's clue gaining ability. You can try to generate an opportunity for yourself to trigger your ability at an opportune moment. Another approach you can take is to use On the Hunt to deliberately draw out enemies that are worth victory points to maximize your experience gains. That's been really enjoyable for me, and that's kind of the direction that I've taken when I've used this card. It's nice that the card overrides spawn instructions as well, on top of keeping you from having to trek over to an enemy that would normally spawn further away. That's also a big help with aloof enemies. Since this spawns the enemy engaged with you, you don't have to spend an action to engage that aloof enemy. I said earlier it's getting harder to decide which events to cut and which to keep, but my experience so far with On the Hunt has been good, and I expect it to stick around. And finally, we've saved the best card for last. I think this is widely agreed to be the most powerful card in the pack. Stick to the Plan. This is a Guardian asset, level 3, permanent, exceptional. Before you draw your opening hand, search your deck for up to 3 different tactic and/or supply events and attach them to Stick to the Plan. Shuffle your deck. Cards attached to Stick to the Plan may be played as if they were in your hand. As an additional cost to play an attached card, exhaust Stick to the Plan. So you get to hand select 3 tactic and or supply cards before the game starts that you can use on demand during play. Note that it does say 3 different events, so you can't pick 2 copies of the same card, and you do have to exhaust it when you play one of the cards, which prevents you from playing more than 1 per round. This is incredibly nice. Not only is it powerful just having the 3 extra cards, Stick to the Plan also lets you change the way you approach your deck building. If you have a situational card or a card that you really want to see only in the early game or the late game, Stick to the Plan may allow you to get away with buying just a single copy of that card, knowing that you'll still have it exactly when you need it. For example, the event Ever Vigilant, you really want to see that early. In the past, the best way to raise your chances of seeing it turn 1 was to buy 2 copies, but with Stick to the Plan, you can guarantee access to it turn 1, so you can just stick to buying 1. Not only do you save the experience you would have spent on the second copy, but you also free up a little bit of deck space too. I've pulled up the tactics cards here. We have 24 total, and one of them is a signature card for Skids. There are a lot of great possibilities here. Just to mention a few, if you set aside Prepared for the Worst, you can use it to have a very good chance of getting your preferred weapon on turn 1 between your opening hand, your mulligan, and Prepared for the Worst. Ever Vigilant can really accelerate your first turn. That's one that I've been using with Stick to the Plan, and I believe in all 3 games where I've used it, I was able to play 3 assets on turn 1, something that never quite materialized when I tried to use Ever Vigilant before. I think a lot of times in the past I was hitting 2. Elusive and Shortcut are both just great cards, so it's nice to have guaranteed access to them, especially the level 2 version of Shortcut. The supply trait isn't as common. There are 5 of those cards, and as you can see, it's mostly the Emergency Cash family. There's also Extra Ammunition, which seems like a good target as well. So Stick to the Plan. It's a really interesting card. Lots to think about when you're selecting which 3 cards to set aside with it. I think this is definitely the most exciting card in the pack, and part of why it's such a great pack for Guardians. And there you have it, the 11 new cards from Black Star's Rise, the penultimate expansion in the Path to Carcosa cycle. As always, thanks for watching the Atlas Agency, and good luck in your own investigations of the Path to Carcosa. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, and remember that you can also find more of my Arkham stuff online over at atlasofarkham.wordpress.com. Thanks again!